You know, here at British Airways this morning, I've noticed people checking 3 or 4 bags through for their international flight, yet they hang on to their camera bag and carry it on to use on the plane. If you enjoy photography like I do, that's understandable. It doesn't hurt to pamper your camera just a little bit and keep it with you during the flight. In fact, you can get some pretty spectacular pictures during the flight. But let's talk right now about traveling with a camera, and more specifically, traveling with film. Well, first of all, you may have heard conflicting reports about the damage that can be done to your film by airport X-ray machines. When you hit the airport security check, do you just let your camera bag go through the X-rays and hope for the best? Well, here's what I do. I keep all my film separate in a clear plastic bag that I can quickly remove when I get to the X-ray machine. I take out the plastic bag and send the camera bag under the X-ray and ask for a visual inspection of the film.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Actually, it's the higher speed films, the ones designed for low light of ASA 1000 or more that can be seriously damaged by just one pass through these machines. The lower speed films...
Thank you.
Thank you. The lower speed films can be passed through these machines up to 5 times before you'll notice any serious damage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, here's an important point. We're just talking about the United States here. In some foreign countries, particularly those in the Near East, the Middle East, and the Soviet Union, you might already have 2 strikes against you. First, you're not really entitled to ask for a hand inspection, like you are with these kind folks. Second, the X-ray machines operate with a far higher dosage than the ones here in America. The clear plastic bag trick usually works if you politely ask for a hand inspection, but the authorities are not obligated to do so. If they insist on putting your film through the machine, well, I guess all you can really do is cross your fingers and hope for the best. Now, here's something else for you to think about when you're traveling. Let's just suppose that you're going to Japan, where most single-lens reflex cameras are made. Upon your return, you have to go through U.S. Customs, and the customs officer says, hey, that's some pretty nice equipment you bought on your trip. And he says, you'll have to pay a duty before you can bring that camera equipment into the United States. You say, hey, wait a minute, that's my camera equipment. I bought it before I left and took it on my trip. Well, he can't prove you're wrong, and you can't prove he's wrong, but he's the government, and you can predict who's going to win that argument. The way to get around all this is before you leave on your trip, especially if you're going to be bringing a lot of expensive photographic equipment along, make out a list. Put the description and the serial numbers of your camera equipment, and then register it with the United States Customs Service, and allow a little extra time before you leave at the airport for a customs inspection. If you've got a lot of equipment, you might want to check with the embassies of the countries you'll be visiting to make sure there's no problems bringing cameras and equipment into the country. Now, the reason for that is some countries want to make sure that you don't bring cameras and equipment into the country and then sell it, thereby avoiding the import taxes. You might have to guarantee in writing that you'll bring out what you brought in. Now, X-rays, customs, imports, exports, if you're a serious photographer, these are some things you have to give some thought to. But airports and airplanes aren't just a source of hassles for photographers. They're also a source of some pretty great pictures. There's usually an angle where you can get a good shot of the plane you're flying, which is something you'll want to do, especially if you're flying a piece of equipment that's as exciting and visually interesting as British Airways' supersonic Concorde. Now, what about shooting pictures inside the plane? Well, usually there aren't any restrictions, but be sure and have some consideration for your fellow passengers, especially if you're going to be using flash. Now, this is a British Airways 747, and as you can see, there's plenty of room here, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to head up to the flight deck to see where they fly this thing from. Now, as you can imagine, it might not be possible to get into the cockpit during the flight, but while you're sitting on the ground like this, a simple request may be all that's needed to gain access to a pretty spectacular shot. Now, while we're sitting here in the airport, I don't see much more out the window than some aircraft equipment, but once you're flying, you might spot the great-looking sunset or the perfect cloud shot or a beautiful city skyline ablaze in light, and of course you want to shoot a picture of it. Well, the biggest problem you're going to have here is minimizing the reflections on the glass here. Actually, that's plexiglass, but what you want to do is shoot what's outside without seeing the window itself. Probably the best solution is to use a rubber lens shade like this one on the end of your lens. You just take your lens and press it up against the window like that, and that should minimize any stray reflections. Now, you might think, how about if I use a polarizing filter? That's usually good in minimizing reflections on glass in most situations. Well, as I just mentioned, this is plexiglass, and a polarizing filter will only tend to darken any imperfections or scratches that are on the plexiglass and also darken the overall image. So that probably is not a very good idea. So you can see there are all kinds of advantages in keeping your camera with you while you're in the airport and on the plane, not only for the protection that it offers your equipment, but for the great pictures you can get while you're on your way. Now, there's a final word I want to offer to you, and that's about security. When you're traveling through the airport, you've got your hands full of your suitcases and bags and whatever, be sure and put your camera strap so it goes across your chest like that, not just on your shoulder so nobody can grab it while your hands are full. Also, however your camera bag is designed, be sure it's snapped or clasped or zippered or whatever so nobody can reach in on the way and grab a $500 lens. And when you take a picture and you're staring at your subject and really concentrating on your photography, you set your camera bag down, just step through the strap like that so that your camera bag doesn't go traveling before you do. That way you'll come home with some great travel pictures and you'll come home with the great camera equipment that you left with.